So I think we should describe for the listeners what elder mediation actually is. Jane, you want to handle that?
Sure. Well, when families get to a point where they have an elder that needs some help, and they have to have what they would consider sort of a dreaded conversation, a difficult conversation, they don't know how to have that conversation. Maybe they try and it kind of goes into meltdown. And so what they can do is have an elder mediator help them to have that difficult conversation. And so the mediator gets the group together. This may be the parents, the adult children, and they have usually a set agenda of what they're going to talk about, what needs to, maybe a decision that needs to be made for the elder. And the parties come together and they have that conversation. And the elder mediator's job is to help them have the conversation, to help them communicate with each other, maybe in ways that they haven't been able to do so before.
Yeah. I actually watched an elder mediation session with one of my clients and was really impressed with how the older adult was solicited for their opinion, even though it was sort of the kids that were leading the brigade to have the conversation. 3 of the kids were on one page, the other child was on another page, and then the mom was sort of on her own page. So you had a lot of different factions vying for attention. But the elder mediator did such a beautiful job of recapping what each person said, especially the older adult. Is that common?
I really think that that's a hallmark of mediation because, as Jane said, when people can't talk to each other and the communication's broken down, there is something lost when people are not heard. And what happens sometimes in families when you have adult children who are in the prime of their professional life frequently, and they feel and exercise a lot of power. It's very, very important for the elder person to have a voice. At Recourse, we say the elder mediation gives seniors a voice and a choice about how the problem is going to be solved.
And what that choice means, I'm glad you brought that up, Cate, because people need to know that the elder mediator does not make the decisions, that the elder mediator is there to help the parties make a decision. And so that is a distinction that people need to understand.
And also, I think, just to follow on from that, Jane, really what we're talking about, the process of mediation really is a skill that the mediator has to unearth all of the underlying needs and concerns of all the parties. Sometimes people, when they're faced with a problem, they'll say, this is my preferred solution. I'll give you an example, Kira. We had a case recently where there was an 87-year-old man who'd had a mild stroke, not enough to be hospitalized, but enough to cause some concern to his son and daughter. The daughter was living in another state, and the son and his wife were living in the county, but because of the family dynamics, the out-of-state sister was putting a lot of pressure on the son who was here to take the father's car away. Now, this is a gentleman who had spent his entire life as an auto mechanic, restoring cars. Cars was such a huge... Oh, I know. It really had to do with not only his independence and his mobility so that he could go play poker with his buddies and the other things that he liked to do, but that it really had to do with his sense of who he was. He loved driving cars. It was a big part of who he was. So when his son actually did capitulate to his rather, in his words, bossy sister, and did in fact park the car in his house so that his father couldn't drive it, it just was so upsetting to the father. So we had a mediation, and really the person who brought everybody together was the daughter-in-law, who got on very, very well with her father-in-law. And
which is not uncommon. We've talked about that on the show before, the power that the in-laws actually have with the...
And she was concerned about her own husband's health, and she was really worried about how the father was going to deal with things as they went down the line, because she knew that her husband and her sister-in-law did not get along, and that they needed some way, some sort of structured conversation where everybody could be heard and treated with respect. So the out-of-state sister participated by Skype. Thank goodness for this technology. It's fantastic. We're a non-profit. We can't afford a big phone bill, but Skype makes that possible.
Well, for those who don't know what Skype is, tell them.
Oh, it's a computer-based voice internet I'm not a techie person, but basically it allows people to have long-distance conversations very inexpensively.
It's like the Jetsons
It's like the Jetsons.
You get to see who you're talking to, basically.
Yes. And
but it's wonderful because in many families, people are scattered around the country.
Right.
And so with Skype, you can either do audio where you just hear each other, or you can do visual so that you can see each other.
And with mediation, sometimes you're writing things down as you're making a plan. So you might have a whiteboard that everybody on Skype would need to be looking at. Right?
Exactly. And then the mediator can test all of the options that the people are coming up with and help them think about creative ideas that they may not have thought of before, but that those ideas and solutions would address the underlying needs and interests of people. So in this case, the gentleman really just wanted to be near his cars, and they worked out an agreement where the daughter-in-law would drive him to poker. He didn't want actually to drive in the rain or at night because he noticed his night vision wasn't so good. So they worked out some concrete things, and then the best thing that happened, according to the son, was that he could now feel like he could hold his own in a conversation with his sister, and that made the father happy. So it's one of those things where unless you get some help to have that kind of conversation, powerful members of the family can hijack the conversation sometimes, and the mediator can be there to referee, if you like, or to manage the flow of communication so everybody is heard.
Although you guys aren't making the ultimate decisions.
Correct. We're not making any decisions.
That's important to say. You're not arbitrating the discussion.
No.
You're just sort of facilitating it.
And arbitration, that came up just yesterday. A gentleman I was talking to about his 90-year-old mother who wants to drive and won't surrender her driving license to him. I said, what do you know about mediation? And he said, well, isn't it where we come together and we tell you our side of this story and then you make a decision? I said, no, that would be arbitration. Mediation is about empowering the people involved to make their own choices based on their best interests.